Hello. Thank you for joining us for ShipIt number 15. Let's Encrypt and Shopify, securing Shopify's 4.5 million domains. ShipIt is our monthly virtual gathering where we bring together engineering Shopify, and in this special occasion, our guest, Josh from Let's Encrypt, together to talk about the things they're working on and to take questions from all of you that decide to join us today. ShipIt was created as a way for us to connect with all of you in this digital world. My name is Anita Clark. I'm the Senior Managing Editor of the engineering blog at Shopify. Today is a special ShipIt because we're happy to welcome a special guest. We've teamed up from Let's Encrypt to work towards a secure and privacy-respecting web. We truly believe in this mission, and we're a gold sponsor. And like many other companies, we're committed to this work. For example, those are Facebook, the EFF, AWS, Mozilla, and Google Chrome. You'll learn more about how we've secured our 4.5 million domains with Let's Encrypt at Shopify. You can ask questions for our speakers in the chat by selecting the Q&A mode, and we'll be alerted to your questions. So I'm going to turn it over to Charles from Shopify to get us started on our journey today. Thank you.
So today I wanted to discuss a bit like the story of Shopify and HTTPS in general, and how Let's Encrypt came into this. So HTTPS for Shopify started as an experiment in 2013, and we targeted to start a massive transit certificate in 2015. So at the time it was around like 650,000 domains. And for us, from the beginning, it was clear that we wanted all of that to be automated, because it would not be practical to have human involved in this, and we didn't tell it would be the responsibility of a merchant to do it. So at the time, like the landscape was quite different. Like a certificate authority where companies that frankly build their way of doing was a bit stuck in the 90s in many ways. Like most of the APIs that we could work with were really based around this idea of reselling certificates. So the idea that you would just basically give away a certificate was completely alien to them. The idea was mostly that the customer would purchase a certificate from you, and then they would install it on their server by themselves, download it, install it, right? So the idea of completely automating that was not around, and for us it was very problematic because the API were designed around this. So error message were meant to be pass along to a human, not to be handled from computer to computer. So for us it was very difficult to work with that. That's about the same time that Let's Encrypt started to make some noise, and the first thing that I noticed about Let's Encrypt was not only that they would become a free certificate authority and enable a lot of smaller websites to have HTTPS, but also that it was very focused around automation with the ACME specification that was designed for computer to computer talking to each other and getting a certificate to have encryption. So having this built around a specification was was a big change. And at that time, I had already had experience working on with a couple of providers. So I wrote a client for Let's Encrypt in the summer, and was really happy with the result. But at the time, we already had a solution, pretty far, and Let's Encrypt was in beta. So we ended up rolling out with other certificate authority back then. And that turned out to be quite problematic because their API was quite slow, so they had to put some throttle into with our API token, and then as a result, we did some knack and math, and we were okay, it's going to take us around 100 to 110 days, just to provision all the certificate for all of our merchants. So that's what we did. But once we rolled it out, we were already conscious that we were going to have to find an alternative for that. I mean, if it was just for ongoing certificate provisioning, we would have been fine, because we can spread them through the year and it would have worked for a while. But we were very concerned that what would happen if there was like a security incident and we had to do like a fast recovery and enroll all the certificate. So it would have been a problem. So we decided to give Let's Encrypt a go, and that's about the same time that we decided to try to get involved, and we became a sponsor for Let's Encrypt, and we're able to roll out all of our domain on Let's Encrypt like in a couple of hours. To be quite frank, I think it's more of the way we were handling the certificate ordering that took that long. I don't really think there was like any bottleneck on Let's Encrypt side. So for us, it was like very encouraging. And the other part that was very encouraging is that because it's working with a spec, we were able to know for sure that we're handling all the errors and be confident about the state of all of the domain at all the time, And in the end, it was a lot less code to implement. And we knew that in the future, if things go well with Let's Encrypt and the ACME specification, we might even add other provider using the exact same implementation. So that was like another great benefit. And yeah, like I would say like probably like 4 to 6 months later, we slowly increased shift our priority in terms of certificate authority to Let's Encrypt, and since 2016, it's been our main certificate authority. For us, it was quite a departure. Working from most certificate authority, like you would work with them. You have an account manager, and if you have a problem, then they will open a ticket, and then for the most part, they don't develop their own software. Let's Encrypt is fully open, so if I have a question, I would go on the IRC. They would point me to the line of code on GitHub that is actually causing my problem, and then if I found some ambiguity in the specification, they would ping me on the change. So it was a great experience for us, and we've been happy working with them since 2016.
Thanks, Charles. Hi, I'm Josh from Let's Encrypt. We're a service run by Internet Security Research Group. So we issued our first certificates in December of 2015. I think Charles was saying, he heard about it around that time, and that summer, actually, probably before we were totally live, I'm guessing he wrote the first Ruby ACME client. And today we're serving over 260 million domains. So our model is really based on ease of use. So in 2015, getting a certificate was very time-consuming, complicated, costly. It could take a long time to figure out where to get one or where the right place for you is. The process is quite complicated with online accounts and payments and things like that. And we really need to make this easy. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we realized this was a problem. So I worked on a web browser for a lot of my professional life. And for a while, I was running the networking team for Firefox. And it was our goal to make sure that Firefox networking was secure. There's only so much you can do on the browser side, though, if websites don't enable HTTPS. And there's really nothing we can do to make websites use HTTPS. They just have to do it. So working on security or networking security in a browser at the time was a bit frustrating, because it's like you're trying to put a better lock on the door when there are no walls on the house. You can only make security so much better for users if the websites don't enable HTTPS. So we thought a lot about why aren't websites enabling HTTPS? And we talked to people, and they wanted to do the right thing. They wanted to turn it on, but certificates were always the problem. They didn't know where the best place to get them from. They didn't, have the money or the approval to spend the money, and the processes were long and complicated. So they just went without it. And a lot of people were using other services to run their website. It just wasn't an option to have free HTTPS, or it wasn't the default. So we realized that we were going to have to do something about this. And it was a pretty daunting issue because, how do you convince hundreds of millions on the websites on the web to enable something that it just seemed like a very difficult problem, and it was a problem we should have solved 10 years ago, and we didn't want to spend too much more time solving it. We wanted a solution that would work pretty quickly on the scale of the internet. And it really had to start with making certificates just as easy as possible to get, not just a bit easier than they were. We need to make it almost to the point where people don't even need to know about certificates. It just has to work. The software has to do it for people. So, Shopify is a great example of how that works today. You sign up for Shopify. You don't need to know that much about HTTPS or TLS. Shopify just takes care of this for you. It's a part of the experience. And that's what we want it to be for everybody. So when you set up a server, we want you to be able to use Let's Encrypt and ideally know as little about us as possible. We want you to just get the cert from us and manage it all in software. So we thought that if we made this kind of system available, that might be a big step towards getting a lot of websites to use it. And I think it turned out that we were right about that. We made this available in 2015, and back then about 39% of web pages, so not websites, but web pages, 39% of web pages were using HTTPS. And I think those pages were very concentrated in the most popular sites on the internet. I think the percentage of websites using HTTPS was much lower than that. So today, I think we're approaching 93% HTTPS page loads in the United States and around 85% globally. So we're just under 6 years later today, and the numbers are looking much better. So the difference between 39% and 92, 93 in North America, 85% globally is huge. That's a lot of people's data protected. And on the scale of the internet, 6 years is really not that long. So we're really excited about this. And we weren't the only people helping to do this. There have been a lot of advocates out there. The browsers have made some great changes, particularly to their user interfaces and how they present security issues to users, also pushing websites to move to HTTPS. I think it was really important, for example, that browsers started saying not secure when a site is not secure instead of just saying nothing. So we were not the only people pushing things in this direction, but I like to think that we were a big part of it. And it was all about ease of use. And even the fact that Let's Encrypt certificates are free is really a lot about ease of use and not so much about the money. If you have to enter credit cards and make sure payment data is up to date or get payment authorization from the company you work for and things like that, there's a lot more work. It really makes it so you can't automate the system of getting a certificate very well because somebody's going to have to sit there and deal with the payment part of this. So I'm really proud of what our team has done to make this as easy as possible. And we also wouldn't be able to do this without help from our community. So people like Charles out there writing ACME clients, there's such a huge diversity of deployment environments in the world. Shopify has their own system for how they run their servers and how they'd like to get certificates. People running servers at home have a different system. There's no way that Let's Encrypt and our, 15, 16 staff members could write a client for every deployment environment. So we really depend on our community that is now written, it's got to be hundreds of ACME clients that work with Let's Encrypt. So no matter where you are, what your server deployment platform looks like, there's probably an ACME client out there that you can use. And that's totally made possible by our community. So one more thing I want to mention is that today, we are 100% supported by philanthropic donations, from corporate sponsorships to grants and individual giving. So today is our last day of our summer giving campaign. There is a link in the chat. It's let'sencrypt.org/donate. If you're able to help us out, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles and Josh. That was great. For people that are looking at that donate link, if you're in the United States, you can get a Raspberry Pi. So if you're looking to get one, you should click that link and donate. I'm kind of disappointed it doesn't come for us in Canada here. But okay, so questions. If you have questions, please drop them in the chat. We will see them. Use the Q&A mode. It's just clicking that little circle on the right-hand side of the window. Awesome. So we have our first question. and it's from Taylor. And here we go. When you order a certificate and prepare to complete one of the challenges, how did Shopify think about each challenge option in respect to the customer experience? Did Shopify opt for the DNS challenge or for HTTP challenge? And was there a factor in picking the challenge protocol? This is for you, Charles.
Yeah, so right from the beginning, actually, if we step back a little, the reason why it took us so long to actually provide HTTPS to our merchant is because before SNI, what's the name for that protocol? But basically, the ability to identify for which domain the TLS connection is being open, we couldn't do it, because, and the reason is because if we decided to do that, it would have forced us to tell the merchant to move their IPs around on DNS. So from the beginning, the idea of sending the merchant to play in their DNS record was completely ruled out. Shopify is in that time, we were still targeting maybe people are a bit more technical than they are today, but still it was completely out of question that they would need to complete a DNS challenge. So the idea was really to use the HTTP challenge from the beginning, and the only provider that we looked into were those who would let us complete a challenge like that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, for us, it was a complete, a big no-no, to send the merchant complete a challenge themselves, and then potentially, we could break down the line if they delete the record by mistake or something like that. While the HTTP challenge, you're kind of guaranteed that if the store is working, most likely, we're going to be able to complete the challenge. And for the most part, merchants come to Shopify with their domain already that they purchased from somewhere else, and that's the reason that this part cannot be automated. If the merchant were all buying domains from Shopify, then maybe we could have another discussion. But in our case, we don't really have control over the DNS for the merchant, so we cannot do it on their behalf.
So Taylor has responded to Charles. It makes sense because the HTTP challenge almost guarantees that domain is ready to be used. If it's just a THT record, there's nothing to say that there isn't an overriding CNAME. I didn't know about the SNI history. After you obtain, this is a lot of acronyms, sorry. After you obtain the PEM formatted certificate, what does Shopify do immediately after? For example, update daemon config, update Nginx config.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you want to look into it into more detail, there's actually another Charles that wrote a blog post on this on the engineering blog. I think it's a brief history of TLS at Shopify or something like that. But basically, server SNI is a server name indication, right? So basically, before at the very beginning of the TLS handshake, the server is being told which domain you're accessing, right? Before that, the assumption was each IP would have its own certificate, and the certificate would be valid for all of the domain that are served by that certificate. But in the case of Shopify, right now, in minute we would need 4-point-something millions IPs, which is not realistic. So the way we do it is using the SNI in Nginx. We have a custom Lua script that go fetch the certificate in a data store, and then serve the certificate on demand. So that means that as soon as the certificate is in the data store, the very next request is going to be able to be served over HTTPS. So there's nothing to reload or anything. It's always fresh. And in the newer infrastructure, some of those are being pushed to Cloudflare. But it's the same principle where like it's being pushed to a data store, and there's nothing to read about.
Awesome. Okay. I have another question here, and this is going to be for you, Josh. What are some of the most important steps next for Let's Encrypt?
Two things come to mind that are going to be user-facing. So the first one is I think we'd like to reduce certificate lifetimes below 90 days. So, or at least we want to give people the option to do that. So right now, all certificates from Let's Encrypt have a validity period of 90 days. And that's shorter than a lot of other certificate authorities because shorter certificate lifetimes are generally more secure. If you have a computer doing your renewals for you, it shouldn't really matter how long your certificates live. Your computer just gets a new certificate for you whenever it needs it. So we chose 90 days for security reasons. We have a blog post about that on our website, but we'd like to offer the option for people to get shorter certificate lifetimes. So I think we're going to be working on that within the next year or so. The second thing is, sometimes we have to revoke certificates for people for any number of reasons. And when that happens, if we don't have great contact information for the people who are doing that, they may not know that they're going to need to get a new certificate early. So we're working on this thing called automatic revocation information, I think, ARI. So the idea here is that we'll be able to signal to people if they need to get a new certificate before the current certificate expires for some reason. What that'll allow us to do is if there's some problem that comes up and we need to revoke 1 million certificates, we don't have to get 1 million people to jump into action. We can just send out a signal that says to the clients on the other side, you need to get a new certificate early. Please go ahead and do that. And then we can reissue millions of certificates at a time in an automated way without having to tell people that they have this special circumstance that they need to react to. So that's important because certificate authorities, they make mistakes. We are not immune from that. Issuing certificates is a complicated thing to do. We have made mistakes before. We'll continue to make mistakes. And that's not really something we can get rid of. We just have to understand that mistakes are going to happen and put ourselves in the best possible position to respond to those mistakes and make fixing things as easy as possible. So ARI is a really important part of our plans for that.
Awesome. Our next question is, how many certificates do you issue every day, and how many certificates are you capable of issuing every day?
These days we issue around 2 million certificates per day, and there can be up to 100 websites on a single certificate. So the number of sites we issue for is typically over 2 million, but the number of actual certificates is around 2 million. We've seen it spike up to closer to 3 million. But, I talked in my last answer about what we might have to do if there's an issue. We might have to reissue millions of certificates. So for that reason, we're capable of issuing between 100 and 200 million certificates in a day.
Going into the spike that you've seen, I think it was 3 million certificates a day. Did that surround a particular event, or it's just what happened that day because everything lined up that way for whatever the universe claimed it to happen that day, kind of thing?
We generally don't know why those spikes happen. Usually it is some service onboarding a lot of existing customers. So, Charles mentioned before that there was a time when Shopify was trying to pull certificates for a lot of existing users at one time. And, on whatever day Shopify started doing that from Let's Encrypt, I'm sure we saw a spike. So we got similar sort of events from other organizations when they just decide, we have, 100,000 websites, we want to encrypt them over the next week, and they start just pulling a lot more certificates on a particular day.
Yeah, I could see the situation as well, where at a company like Shopify, if there was even the remote possibility that the private keys for those certificates has been compromised, we probably wouldn't take the risk and just immediately rotate them. So that could spike, 4 million requests in a day. I mean, I would probably send you an email and give you a heads up. But,
Yeah. I mean, it'd be great if you sent us an email, but frankly, our system is set up so that you don't need to do that. If you needed to pull 4 million certificates in a day, you could just do it and there wouldn't be a problem.
I know I gave you a heads up when we onboarded, and you were like, sure. You let me know how that goes.
Yeah. Sometimes people send us an email and they say, we're going to get 10,000 certificates tomorrow, be ready. And, it's really not actually that many certificates for us on any given day. So the system is set up to work no matter what your needs are.
Okay. Our next question is, how does Shopify manage and store the private keys for the certificates? I guess, do we really want to say this out loud is the question, or is it?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's a big secret, but the gist of it is we generate a different private keys for every single domains, and the entire system that is responsible for managing the lifecycle of certificates, so ordering them, renewing them, all of that, as a one-way encrypt key. So basically, that system is able to encrypt those keys, but it's not able to decrypt it. So at that moment in memory, the keys is encrypted, and then the service that is responsible for actually doing the handshake is the one who has the decryption key and is able to do the second part of the process. So that's how we make sure that across the board, we minimize the risk of the keys being compromised.
Okay, next question is kind of in a comment to all these amazing scale numbers that you're throwing out at us, Josh. How many people actually work on Let's Encrypt?
So at any given time, there's about 8 engineers devoted to Let's Encrypt and around 4 other types of staff. So that's people from fundraising to leadership, communications, sort of administrative work, things like that. So 8 full-time engineers, 4 other folks. Yeah, 8 engineers is not a lot of people to work on something like this. We talk a lot about ease of use and efficiency for the people getting certificates from us, but it's also really important to us internally. So we're a nonprofit. We need to make the best use of the money that we have, and we don't charge for the certificates, so we don't have a ton of money. We need to do, a great job with the money that we have. So since the beginning, we've been really focused on efficiency in our internal systems and just making our own internal systems as easy to use and manage as possible. So yeah, we're able to do it with 8 engineers, which I think is pretty remarkable.
It is very remarkable. I'm sure a lot of people right now watching are just blown away. The impact that you've made in these 6 years with 9 engineers is very scary and crazy, but also remarkable. And I think that the company is a really spectacular success. And so I do have a question that I'm going to kind of go off script. Sorry, Taylor. I know you have a couple questions there, but I'll get to them. When you started this, did you think you're going to get to 85% of the web globally secure in 6 years? Did you know from the beginning that this was a hit, this is going to happen? And it was just doesn't matter? Or, was it a slog the whole time? Was it hard to get people to get on board? Obviously, Charles saw what was going on early on because we've been around since the beginning, but I'm kind of curious, how hard was it to get here?
We had no idea. I remember talking with other staff about what we thought the numbers are going to look like 1 or 2 years in, and it was just wild guesses all over the map. I think what we've learned is, people want to do the right thing, and if you give them the tools to do the right thing and those things are easy enough to use, they're probably going to do it. It's amazing to watch the uptick. But yeah, we did not know that it was going to turn out like this, but we had to do something, right? The internet is too important to leave it unencrypted, and we had to take a shot at trying to fix the situation. And I'm glad it worked out, but no, at the time we weren't really sure it was going to work, but like I said, we had to do something. We had to give this a shot.
Amazing. Okay, let's go on to the next question, which is, do you generate the Let's Encrypt private keys on the fly? And I'm assuming this is for Charles, this question.
Yeah, I think like it's a good way to explain it. I mean, like, although like we don't have a per shop certificates, they exist per domains. Like the reason why we could bundle up more domains per certificate, that's a possibility. But given that we don't control those domains, and merchant might successfully set up one of their domains and then get a new one and fail to do to set up that one, we decided to always have one certificate per domain, and because nothing is really shared into infrastructure, that kind of fit well. So that's the direction we decided to go. But yeah, like they're not generated ahead of time. Like right before ordering a certificate, we're going to generate that key for that specific certificate, and then there's going to be like a new key generated for the next certificate you will get for your next order. So when they get renewed in, we renew every 60 days, and that's when that happened.
Next question is, I was reading your annual 2020 report. Can you talk more about the work your team is doing to scale your database infrastructure?
Yeah, so the Let's Encrypt operates off of one database, essentially. That's at the core of everything we do. It keeps track of subscriber accounts, certificates, challenge types, challenge status, things like that. And that database gets pretty big over time. So scaling that database and make sure that it performs well is the biggest issue for us when we think about trying to issue more certs. So we put a huge amount of effort into making sure that this thing is pruned and not bigger than it needs to be, and that it's running on hardware that is fast enough to manage it and has enough storage. I talked a little bit before about how efficiency is really important to us. And one of the ways that we save a lot of time and effort for our staffs is that instead of running a big cluster of databases, we try to run this database off of one particular machine, at least for writes. We have a bunch of replicas that we can do read queries against. But we have one database server at any given time that handles the writes to the database. That really simplifies things for us. On the other hand, that needs to be a pretty powerful database. So we have a blog post on our website that talks about what kind of hardware we use there. I think, it's fun to see what you can stick in a 2U database box these days. I think our machines now have something like 64 physical cores, 128 threads. They're just packed full of NVMe drives. It's impressive hardware, and it is much easier to and more efficient, frankly, to spend money on hardware than it is on a lot of staff time to manage, larger amounts of more complicated but cheaper hardware. So staff time is a huge expense for us. It's much bigger than the amount of money that we need to spend on hardware. So we have maybe a bit of an unusual model for scaling databases, but it works well for us.
Shopify actually did pretty much the same thing. Like for many years, like the database, we had like a single database, and we just quite frankly, throw money at the problem until it was not sustainable anymore. And then we did charting, and we're running our own server infrastructure to the point where we moved to a cloud service, but I think it just makes sense, from a time versus reward.
Totally, we're really lucky that we may have a lot of certificates and subscribers active at any given time, but we're very fortunate the amount of data per certificate we issue is not actually that large. Mm-hmm. I would imagine that the amount of data in Shopify's database is, per customer is a lot more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, for us, it's more like transaction data that was causing problem. Do you see, because at this speed, like your you're kind of like putting the internet, the entire internet in there, right? So do you see that there's going to be like eventually like a wall that you're not going to be able to pass through, or?
Yeah, we're going to hit a wall at some point where we can't continue to do this with a single machine. So we're sort of planning for that day, but hoping we can push it off as far as possible. I think there's been huge progress in the past few years with CPUs and storage that has really helped us keep ahead of things. So, it used to be you could only get, a chip with maybe 24 cores per CPU. Now you can get 64 cores per CPU. You can stick 2 of those things in a machine. NVMe used to be hard to get more than a few drives in there, but now, AMD has 128 PCIe lanes. You can just pack a server full of NVMe and you run OpenZFS on that. You can do some really amazing stuff with storage that's both scalable and incredibly fast. You can stick a lot of RAM and cores in the machine. So we're staying ahead of the game right now, but I don't know for how long that's going to be true.
Do you guys thought about like what you would do if that happened?
Yeah, we're just gonna have to break up the database, and say, instead of one database, we have 2, and we just put certain tables on one database and certain on another, so that the writes are.
Or you do like modulo on your other ID or something like that,
Yeah, something like that. I suspect we're gonna go with moving, functional tables to different machines, but we could by user ID or something. Yeah, and then I
imagine they don't have the same like read-write ratio criteria as well, too.
Yeah, the reads that are the worst for us are our own internal reads. It's not the reads that are involved in getting a certificate from a subscriber. It's like you need to do a query that says how many subscribers did a certain thing over the past 90 days. That read can hit the database really hard. And actually, one of the other huge problems we have is deletes. So we want to delete data from the database. That is an incredibly intensive operation over many, many terabytes of data. So splitting it up will help.
Awesome. That was a lot of fun because Charles, you asked the question that I wanted to ask, and then it dovetailed nicely into future plans, which was awesome. Okay. We have almost 15 minutes left. If you have any questions, pop them into the chat, please. We still have time for you, and they have time to answer anything that you have burning on your mind that you would want to find out from Charles and Josh. I'm going to bring it to community. Josh, can you talk about how you've cultivated and still created this community of people that are really interested in moving the web to a more secure place?
When we built Let's Encrypt, I think I was so focused on trying to build a certificate authority. I mean, before I started building Let's Encrypt, I had no idea how certificate authorities worked. So I was so focused on building it. I don't think that I personally did a great job of building community, but luckily there were enough people who liked the concept and probably, frankly, knew a lot more than I did, that the community just started gelling pretty quickly. So lots of people went out and wrote ACME clients. That was fantastic. We actually don't offer support directly for Let's Encrypt, so you can't really call us if you have a problem or something like that. But the good news is we have a great community site where you can ask questions and you'll get a response really quickly, and that works well. So our staff do look at those questions and try to answer them, but our community does, frankly, beats us to the punch a lot of the time. So people think, maybe you think being pushed to a forum is not the best form of support, but I got to tell you, it works really well. And if you have a question, you shouldn't be afraid to ask there. And then another place where community helps a lot was with translating our website. So our website is available in, somewhere close to 20 languages, 15, 20 languages. Community's done a great job with that. And people are just so interested in the topic of securing the web, and I think they like the product that, thankfully it has not been up to me personally to be really charismatic and bring people in. I don't know if I'm that guy. But yeah, we're so thankful for everybody's involvement. And then we have a couple projects besides Let's Encrypt where we're seeing similar levels of interest. We're working on some privacy respecting metric services and also leading an effort to try to rewrite some of the internet's most critical software in memory safe languages. And we're just getting great community response there. So I think, my lesson from all this is that if you're trying to do something that is cool and important, people are going to come. And your job, I think, for me, I feel like it's less about outreach and it's more about being welcoming. So when people show up and they're interested and they want to help, you want a great landing pad for them and, make it easy for them to help, make them feel welcome and supported, things like that.
There's a question here that kind of dovetails into that. And what kind of best practices and insights have you seen from your experience with the community and what Let's Encrypt's community has built?
We have a couple of people on staff who I think have really great ideas how to manage forums and community. And I learned a ton from just watching them do it. I'm certainly not the one responsible for the quality of our forums, I would say. I think the thing that I've watched and has made a lot of sense to me is that they really don't make room for people to be jerks. When someone is making other people feel bad or being negative or, just bringing the place down a little bit, there's a nice policy of sending them a nice warning and saying, this isn't the sort of behavior that we allow here, and suggesting how they can improve things. And then if they don't improve, then we just, their accounts get banned or something like that. And I think being really diligent about setting a standard for participation in community makes it much better for everybody. If you let people that make other people feel unwelcome run free, then it's no surprise when other people feel unwelcome. So I think our community does a really good job of identifying those issues and dealing with them quickly so that people who want to ask and answer questions can do so in peace. I think that has been a huge part of managing that community well.
Great. And again, another question related to community. What can people do to get involved here? Where can you send them right now to start participating and helping?
Well, if you are a software engineer and you're interested in ACME clients, there's a whole bunch of them out there. And if you want to help add features or look for security issues, that is always super helpful. If you want to help on our community forums, just look for somebody to ask a question and try to answer the question. I think the experience I've heard is that it's difficult the first few times, so you gotta do some more research, but the more of these questions you answer, the easier they get to answer. So helping answer questions on the community forums is a great way to help. And finally, I would say if you know another language that is not English and you want to help us translate, there's some instructions. Our websites are all in GitHub repositories. So in the Let's Encrypt org on GitHub, there's a website repository that has instructions for translating things. So take a look, and if your language is already listed there, you can help us keep that language up to date. And if it's not listed there, you can help us add the language. We offer certificates to people in every single country in the world, and I mean every single one. And it matters a lot when they're able to see a website that's in their local language.
Awesome. Charles, is there ways for Shopify's group to get involved in this too? Do we have specific things besides perhaps contributing to your Ruby client? Are there any call-outs to the community you want to make there?
Yeah, I always have a couple of issues open on my repo. So if you have free time, feel free to give it a stab. But I think in general, the client community is like quite in a healthy state. I think they're all in a good spot. So I think if they can take time to contribute to Let's Encrypt more directly, I think that would be nice. I know you mentioned earlier that you had 8 developers at any given time working on on Let's Encrypt, like how do you evaluate like the contribution from the public and on the open source repository? Like for example, on Boulder and some of your bigger projects, do you have a lot of contribution that come from the outside?
There are definitely some people who contribute to Boulder, which is the name of the software that we use to issue certificates at Let's Encrypt. It's not a lot though, and the main reason for that is that Boulder is really intended to be, it's built specifically for Let's Encrypt's infrastructure. So it's a tough piece of software to pick up and run yourself outside of Let's Encrypt. It's
a bit intimidating to run.
In the way that we have things set up internally. So it is open source, but it's not the kind of open source that we think is ever going to be very widely used. Not many people need to run a large scale public certificate authority. So we value the contributions we get to Boulder. We don't get a ton. And the reason is the software is fairly specific to Let's Encrypt. But especially if you want to help us look for security issues and things like that, we always, would appreciate that.
I find myself like developing a client using the Pebble implementation for the most part because it's easier to run. It seems that I guess it's designed for that. But I really do appreciate the fact that it's open source because, whenever I have a problem, I can just use it as a reference instead of, trying to guess what's going to happen from a documentation or something.
Yeah, transparency is really important to us. There's some practical benefits to transparency. For example, you're able to look at the code and see what's happening when you're developing a client. But it also matters a lot to us for trust. If people don't trust Let's Encrypt, then we can't do our job. So we try to be transparent about things like this so that people can see what we're doing, see the quality of the code we have, see how things work. And you mentioned Pebble. So for people who don't know, the main software that we use to issue certificates at Let's Encrypt is called Boulder, but there's a second piece of software called Pebble, which is like a mini version of Boulder. It implements a lot of the same behavior, but it's much easier to deploy. It's much smaller. It's much easier to play with. So if you want to deploy something locally that issues certificates just like Let's Encrypt does, Pebble is a great choice. It's sort of a testing certificate authority piece of software. And we often, when we're going to add features to Boulder, we often implement them in Pebble first to get a sense for how they're going to work and test them. And then we take what we learn from that experience when we implement it for Boulder, which is actually going to get deployed at Let's Encrypt.
Again, since we're still talking about community, are there any calls that you want to make out for any ACME clients in specific languages that are perhaps missing or could use some help that you'd like to see happen?
I think we have pretty good coverage. If you know of something we're missing, please let us know or help step in and fill the gap. CertBot is a really important client for us. It's probably not something that a large org like Shopify would end up using, but for a lot of people running smaller deployments in particular, CertBot is a really important client for them. So we can always use help with that. That's run by EFF. Let's Encrypt itself does not provide any clients to the public, but CertBot is built by EFF. They do a great job building that, and nonetheless, I'm sure they can use help. I know that for a lot of clients, interestingly enough, it's not the client software itself that they need so much help with, it's the packaging. So it's one thing to build a piece of client software. It's another thing to make sure that it's packaged properly and getting updates properly into Linux distributions and things like that. So if you have packaging experience, I think that's particularly valuable for a number of clients and CertBot in particular.
Charles, any callouts for your project? Do you have anything that people should be looking at in your Ruby client?
No, not much. I mean, lately, I've seen some requests for some users that are interested in adding support for other certificate authority that started to use the ACME protocol, and in my Shopify work as well as other certificate authority that reach out to me. It's like, we now have ACME support. You guys want to talk and so on. So I think it's nice to see that it's becoming a standard. So that's very exciting.
Awesome. We have 5 minutes left. If you have any questions, get them in now. Otherwise, you'll kind of be out of luck, unfortunately, but you can always track them down on Twitter and other ways to ask your question. We have a question here, and it's for Josh. And you kind of talked about it, but maybe you can elaborate more. Why did you start Let's Encrypt? Like, why did you think you were the one to take this on?
Well, there are probably people out there who could have, done just as well or better than I did. But, first of all, I didn't do it alone. I had a lot of great people helping, and including some fantastic co-founders, including Eric Scorla and Peter Eckersley and Alex Haldeman. So there are a bunch of people involved, not just me. But I think we understood the problem. I think we were connected to the right people to get the right advice on what to do. And I had some perspective from the browser's point of view about what we need to do. And somebody had to give it a shot, right? It's too important of a problem to let go anymore. Somebody had to try to make it easier for hundreds of millions of websites to encrypt themselves. And like I said, when we were working on the browser, it's really frustrating that there's only so much you can do to secure a connection if the website doesn't enable HTTPS. So, it felt like we really need to focus on that problem if we want to move connections forward in general. So it was just important. I felt like we had the right access to advice and resources, and we didn't want to wait any longer.
I would imagine though that the fact that you were coming from the browser world was key, because as somebody external to this, I wouldn't even know where to begin to have to be part of the certificate bundle.
Yeah, it's not a world that is highly accessible. It's not a lot of people who know the details about how it works. You definitely don't need to be from the browser world to start a certificate authority. But I think you get a lot of helpful perspective, and you get to know a lot of people that can help you.
Was it a hard sell when in those initial days when you're talking to people?
Yeah, I think it's really hard to convince people that something that ambitious might work on the timeline that you're hoping it'll work. We issued our first certificate in December of 2015. And I would say, working backwards, the year before that, we spent frantically building the certificate authority technically, right? So the effort to build the CA technically started in maybe the third quarter of 2014 or closer to the end of 2014. But I had actually been working on this for years before that to set up, the funding and who's going to be involved. How is this going to work? I spent years trying to get the support in place before we could even write the first line of code. So it was not easy. And I understand why it sounded a little crazy at the time. But, I think one of the most amazing things to me about this whole thing is that it played out largely how we planned it. I think a lot of endeavors start as one thing, and then you learn some stuff and you pivot around, and the final product may work out, but it's not really like what you envisioned. I think it's shocking to me how much Let's Encrypt today is like what we envisioned at the very beginning. Not that there weren't some surprises along the way, but it's been pretty solid execution to plan from the beginning. But yeah, we talked to a lot of companies and potential funders about how we wanted to get this idea off the ground. And it took us a while to get the people who, frankly, when you look at a list of sponsors and people who support us, companies are just people, that no matter what a company is, it's, maybe hundreds of thousands of people. You ultimately just have to convince people, not a company. And we were able to find the right people who understood what we were trying to do inside these companies. I think some of our initial sponsors were Cisco, Akamai, Mozilla. They saw what we were trying to do, and they stepped up to help get it off the ground.
I think that's a good call out, right? Where, ultimately even companies, those are just people. Like at Shopify, I just, I'm not in charge of sponsorship. I just thought let's sponsor them. And then I kind of figured out, that worked at Shopify, and that's how that went. And probably that there's company that would be willing to support you guys, and they haven't taken the time to just go through it.
Great. Well, this is the end of our time together, and it was really amazing. Thank you, Josh and Charles, for spending this hour with us and answering all these questions and sharing your expertise. We'll have a video of this event posted shortly on the engineering blog, and it'll also be shared out on our socials. I'll be sending all the attendees or all the registrants a link to the video in an email also. We're hiring 2021 engineers in 2021, so head over to Shopify and Shopify's career page, and you can find out about our open roles. Let's Encrypt. I don't know if you have any job postings you want to throw to. We can do that. Check Let's Encrypt's homepage. Thank you all for spending this hour with us. We hope you enjoyed this discussion, and we really enjoyed all your questions. There's a survey in the email. Please answer it and let us know what you want to see. Next ShipIt is July 27th, and be on the lookout for our social. If you sign up to the mailing list, you'll get a registration link for our next event. Thank you again, Charles and Josh. Had a great time, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Thanks, Anita.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye.